Hey, everybody. Welcome in Guerilla Sports Off Ice Postgame Live. Well, Megan, I'm going to start this pod by saying something we've only said once before tonight. The Avs fall to the New York Islanders in regulation. 6-3 is the final in this one. The Islanders add an empty net at the end. Megan, I told you right before we started, I don't have a ton to say about this game because this was just a stinker. It was just a stinker of a game for the Avs. Look, Nathan MacKinnon said it a couple. I believe it was actually last season. We talked to him about a loss, and he said, "We play 82 of these. Not going to be perfect every night." We knew with the run the Avs had been on, eventually they were going to have one of these nights where you just kind of come out and lay an egg. Tonight ended up being that night. Not a super fun game to watch, but how are you doing before we get into all of that?
I'm doing all right. I feel like the Colorado Avalanche and I merged fates tonight. I was trying to bake a recipe for the holiday party this weekend while the game was happening.
Okay.
And I messed it up, you guys. So I'm going to have to redo that. All right, you get 82 of these. Sometimes you mess them up. I'll get another chance at it again, and the Avs will too.
So true. There are 82 of these for you, Megan, and you are going to get another chance. But yeah, just so I in my second intermission video that I put out, I told the story from a couple seasons ago on the Stanley Cup run for the Avs. And game 2, round 2 against the St. Louis Blues, the Avs came out and just they had a obviously dominant first round, really good game 1 of round 2. In game 2 of that series, the Avs were it was flat. St. Louis came into Ball Arena, stole a win. And I remember when we got to St. Louis, there was an off day, and we talked to Josh Manson about it. And Manson, he said, the best way I can think to equate it, some days you get up and you go for a run. And he goes, and some days it's a 6-minute mile, 7-minute mile. You feel great. Your legs are moving. You have energy. You're awake. He said, and then there's other days you get up and you put on the same pair of shoes. You get dressed in the same running outfit. Conditions are the same. And maybe it's a 12-minute mile that day because your legs are just heavy. You're not quite feeling right. You just feel a little bit off. That, to me, Megan, was what tonight was for the Avs. It took 4 goals before they finally were able to dig deep enough and find some juice. It just looked to me like they just did not have it tonight. Comment here on the chat. Looked like they were skating in cement. That is a perfect way of describing the way they were skating. I'm sure the way they felt.
Yeah, I think a little bit of an illness has been going around the team, and they've been asked about it, and they would be the last people to use this as an excuse. Going back to the back-to-back on the road, Nashville, Chicago, those games weren't offensively what we were used to seeing from the Avs, and they responded in a really good way following that back-to-back, which they swept, by the way, not to be dramatic. And so where I'm going with this is they probably are a little bit under the weather, and they'd also be the first to tell you not to let that be an excuse. And so kind of building off of Manson and talking about this, it reminds me of Logan O'Connor and his, it's hard to bring your A game every night, but it's important not to let that fall really below a B game. I think what's interesting is I'd probably still give this a C rating in my eyes. But I didn't really feel the Avs were out of it until the final 3 minutes in this game. They're making this push on the power play, the empty net goal against, and I really count them out. But I think it's interesting that because of that Arturi Lehkonen goal at the top of the period in the third, I still kind of had them in this. And it was, if I were a betting woman, the odds were still low in my eyes, but never 0. And so I don't want to put lipstick on a pig and suggest that the Avs having some effort in waves at points in this game is a positive thing. But I do think you can learn a lot about a team in how they play out the final frame. And I'm glad that despite being presumably under the weather and not having their A game tonight, I don't think they fully checked out. Now, I do have criticisms of them in this game that are self-inflicted, but also very fixable. So as we start to do our breakdown kind of period by period, we can get into that more. But I do think that this is the type of game where Jared Bednar can take some learning lessons out of the loss that are still valuable to this team moving forward. And I think the chat has already mentioned it, but more important than this loss is how they respond in the next game.
No, yeah, it's couldn't agree with that, especially that part of it more. You have to, again, and you have to deal with these types of games because there's going to be another one like this. You know what I mean? And hey, you might show up to game 2 of round 2 and you might have a game like this. How do you respond? How do you take what you need to out of it and apply lessons? And then the parts of it that you can just throw away where it's like, hey, you didn't win that race. That goes back to the thing that we were talking about earlier. Like, you didn't really have your legs. There's certain parts of this. Yeah, you can just dump it right in the trash, but you're totally right. What can you take out of it? Take to the next game. How do you respond? To your point of, not really counting them out, it was 4-0. And when they made it 4-1, I was texting back and forth with someone that we work with. And I told him, I said, if it's 4-2 at the end of the second, they're going to win or at least get a point. So when they made it 4-2, especially that quick, I was like, well, this is going to be interesting, especially if they make it 4-3 here. But then once it hits 5-2, the having to overcome another 3-goal deficit, I just felt like that was going to be hard for him. But you're right, Artturi Lehkonen gets that goal early. And that's a testament to what we've seen this team to be made of through the first quarter or almost third of the season here, of where it's like, yeah, they could rattle off a handful of goals here in a row, but just want to make sure that you're 100% correct that we need to. There's parts of this game you don't like. There's stuff you got to clean up, and I guess my point, the reason why I don't have a ton to take away from this game, is because the stuff that we saw here tonight, we know they're better than that. We've seen them be better than that in certain areas. But yes, let's go kind of through this period by period. And really let's start with the goal that I felt kind of just set the tone for this game that comes in the first period, gets the Islanders going. It was a long review. Honestly, Megan, I was watching it saying, oh, that's coming back for sure. And it sounds like that was kind of the sentiment of both broadcasts as well. I liked the challenge from Jared Bednar. What did you see on that one? And then what did you see coming out of that? Because like I said, I kind of thought that deflated the Avs a bit, and they had a hard time getting their legs going after that.
Yeah, I think this game is won and lost in the second period. I put a little less significance on this goal that stands. I thought it was a great challenge because it was pretty 50-50 in my eyes, maybe more like a 60-40 actually, just leaning towards it not going in favor of the Avs. But I thought it was a good challenge, and given the strength of this penalty kill, which it's frustrating that they let a struggling power play team in New York get one tonight late in this game, but it was otherwise good to start. So you have trust in your kill that even if this challenge doesn't go their way, they can back it up. And so I think that second goal for the Islanders coming so late in that first period is where I start to take issue with how they start the second then, because this still could have been within the grasp if they let that roll off their shoulders, because it's just two goals, and one of them they can feel a little bit funky about. But truly, it emerged as a greater problem in their net front coverage and communication later in this game. That's why, whether it got in their heads or they just didn't learn from this, it's self-inflicted. And so I think that this first one, you could chalk it up to, all right, they need to communicate with each other a little bit better, because you could see in Taves' body language that he thinks Mackenzie Blackwood has the save and there's a whistle coming, and then there just isn't. You look like you have something to say. Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to ask you, did you think Mackenzie had it? Because I had two issues with it, and my first issue was I felt like if he isn't disturbed, that puck sits under him and he probably gets a whistle a couple, second and a half, 2 seconds later.
Mackenzie's interesting because he keeps pucks in play even when he kind of initially absorbs them. And so if the whistle had been blown, I would have believed he had it and no questions asked. But I'm a little bit unsure. That's where I'm on the fence with it. Is I can't tell if he had it solidly covered or just enough to tie it up for a second, but it's trickling loose underneath him split second later. And just based on Mackenzie Blackwood, the way that he plays some of these pucks so immediately back into play after initially absorbing them, I'm not sure he did have it.
Because it looked to me from the angles that we were able to get, right? And we know that the War Room in Toronto has more angles than what we see on the broadcast. I see that puck go under his under his feet, and I thought it disappeared. And then you see an Islander stick come through, and in my opinion, that not only is what knocks Mackenzie Blackwood down, but what jostles the puck loose enough to the point where then kind of what you're saying, where it's like, yeah, that's a puck that's kind of up for grabs. He doesn't really, does he have it in play or whatever. I just thought that he had a moment where if an Islander stick doesn't come in, that puck's underneath him. But again, you can't say that for sure. I also thought, and I think this was maybe something that you were alluding to a little bit with the net front communication. And I thought John Michael Lyles made a great point. He was, talking about like, yeah, I thought there was contact there, et cetera, but the Islanders are sending a lot of guys to the front of the net. You got to clear bodies out from in front. They're collapsing. You got to box guys out. I think that ties in a little bit with what you were saying. And that could be a little bit of a, symptom that led to the scramble around Mackenzie Blackwood that then leads to a call that you don't like going in your favor. And you can trace it back to, box out, make sure guys aren't getting sticks in there.
Yeah, because, as we sit here talking about it, you can tell in Taves' body language that he also thinks a whistle is coming. So the person with perhaps one of the best views in the house also thinks that. So that's where I think it's a good challenge. What I want to drive home is this one challenge not going their way should not have derailed things. And I don't think that it really did. I think that they outshoot the Islanders in that first period. It was letting one so late in the first go that was a bit frustrating to see. And then I think that they didn't respond at the start of the second with the right attitude. That's where things really derailed for them. So not to say we shouldn't sit here and talk about it. I just don't want to get too in the weeds because that decision was made and done with pretty early into the first.
No, I completely agree. I just, when my two things with it are, one, it just continues the mystery of goalie interference. And two, because I'm totally with you on, I was really surprised at the way they started the second period. I was expecting a lot more jump, a lot more push, and for them to kind of come out and start to put their stamp on the game. So I'm in complete agreement with you. When that didn't happen, I was like, that's, I thought that was an interesting moment in the game. But I did, Megan, when I was watching it, I thought that was a moment where they looked deflated after that call went against them. It was a long challenge that usually favors that it's going to be overturned. And it just felt like, in my opinion, from that moment, they never got things going. But I absolutely agree with you on the way they came out for the second, I think was where this went from. The game is clearly within reach as long as you kind of get your stuff together and come back out for the second. And they definitely did not do that.
Yeah, because you look at the goals that follow, including the one late in the first and then the one that the Islanders get at the start of the second. And there's communication issues here as well. So one, my broader point is they've been playing in front of Scott Wedgwood, and I do believe that goalies have habits, and this is just a little bit of a growing pain of getting back into the rhythm of playing with Mackenzie Blackwood between the pipes and getting used to some of his tendencies as a goaltender, like keeping pucks in play, because this happens in like that first goal for the Islanders in the second with a miscommunication with Manson trying to clear pucks from the net front. And similarly, Gerard in his lane coverage getting back on that second goal in the first period kind of doesn't communicate what his assignment is. So where I'm going with this, though we can get into the nitty gritty of each of these, is a lack of communication as to what an assignment was, right? Like Brent Burns gets burned on the power play. And that's not even so much a lack of communication, but because Drury's overcommitting to his guy out high, Burns being the guy to get back and defend inside the hash marks is a tough call because he just doesn't quite have the same edges as some of the other skaters to be able to move laterally, and so he's easy to get inside. So it was a communication issue. Sorry, this was meant to be a broader point of I think that between Blackwood and the team, this is necessary for them to get back into a rhythm with each other. I think they're going to be having greater conversations about, one, their net front coverage, being a little more assertive there, because two, some of these mistakes are born off of second opportunities or a quick strike attack from New York, either capitalizing on turnovers, like on the breakout, Nelson loses the puck when he should be outside his own blue line with it. It's things through the neutral zone during changes as well. And so this is where the greater communication was not so great for the Avs tonight through the neutral zone in some of those line changes, leading to mistakes, those quick strike attacks, and then just not really great net front coverage. All of this boils down to, in my mind, communication. And so that feels like a very fixable thing for a team that I think otherwise communicates a lot, to include Manson, who Brent Burns has told us is very vocal on the ice. I think in talking about this Horvat goal that's at the start of the second period, to see a player like Manson in that position, it just seems a bit out of character. And so I'm not overly worried about the nature of these mistakes either, because that's what I would boil it down to.
Well, and not to, because I think everything that you just said, like, that's great breakdowns of what we saw and where things went wrong. And I think you're spot on. My whole thing with watching this game, Megan, is like, yep, that's all stuff that we know is not an issue with this group. And I think out of character is a great way to describe the entirety of in my opinion, what we saw here tonight. And I was going to go take a step back earlier when you're talking about the penalty kill and that being out of sorts at times. The penalties that they were taking too. I mean, you're reaching. You're talking about stick fouls and the penalty that Marty Netjes takes. It's like you reach inside on a guy and you literally grab on it because you're beat. Instead of moving your feet to stay with him, it's easier to reach out and grab. And it's just it's things like that I looked at here tonight, saying, worry isn't even a word that comes into my mind. And I think this is a group that's earned that given what they've done the first couple months of the season. But I think, to your point, I think this is an excellent game for Jared Bednar and his coaching staff to be able to take a lot of film out and say, hey, look, we're going to show you guys a bunch of stuff we haven't done all season, but we did last night. And if we play like that, we're going to get those results more often. So let's make sure we're not doing these things. And I think you had a lot of tape coming out tonight. So much of what you're talking about here, and it's all stuff that the coaching staff is going to be able to point at and say, yeah, you can fix this. Here's how we fix this. Here's what we've been doing, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of good film to come out of tonight. But to me, out of character, I think that's a great phrase to use. I think that's what this game was. Take what you need to out of it. Move on.
Yeah, I think in talking about that too, they just weren't creating the way that they like to soon enough in this game. And so you could see something you don't normally see, and that is just a little bit of frustration creep into their game. One, credit to the New York Islanders, because they clearly played opposite the Avs with full recognition that this is the top team in the league. Mm-hmm. I loved even the second intermission going into that third period after the Barzal power play goal. They interview Barzal on the Islanders broadcast, and he is leading with the fact that this is the best team in the league. Like, they're not out of the woods yet, and the danger is still there. I think that perspective is very important. Can
I add a quick point right there as it relates to that?
Yes.
When the Avs scored that second goal, I actually thought, Megan, even the Islanders' body language was a little like, oh, shit. this is suddenly just a 2-goal game and there's a ton of time. I thought you could see it on their faces and in their body language that exactly what you just alluded to, that they were having that conversation on the bench of like, yo, you're up 4-0, but you are not out of the woods. It was 4-0 like that. It was 4-2. So that's, interesting to hear Barzal, verbalize that.
He used the phrase too that they can score at will, and
Mm-hmm.
they more or less do, right? With Arturi Lehkonen getting the goal at the top of the third period. So I think it's interesting to keep that perspective in mind, kind of outside of the Avs bubble for a second. And Caitlin brings up in the chat that the Kale penalty is bad. I agree, because that's the point in the game where, I said I'm not a betting woman, but the odds are starting to feel a little bit lesser. You have one of your most leaned on, trusted defensemen taking bad penalties in his own end. He's being put in a place of desperation in his defending, and that's just never a place that the Avs should be in, especially when their defensive details otherwise this season have been so good. So it's kind of unsurprising to me that is the power play for the Islanders that they ultimately score on. It's born from a bad Cale Makar penalty, which, again, uncharacteristic. And so you kind of know you're in Twilight Zone hockey when you've got your best players making mistakes like that. You've got your player who's just scored a goal. It was off a weird bounce, but in Marty Netsch's using his speed to gain the zone quickly on that play, right? Getting moved to the third line. I don't even view that so much as a demotion to Marty Netsch's, but Jared Bednar was trying to catch a spark because they just weren't creating the way that they needed to be. So this is, on one side of it, them not communicating with each other enough and not being clean in their changes, and then their coverage through the neutral zone leading to these quick strike attacks, and then not defending their net front. That's one side of it. And they just weren't really creating the way that they needed to be. Like the power play that they get late at this game, they don't even get a shot on net, and instead there's 2 shorthanded chances against. And so I think that this sort of emphasized the type of night that the Avs were having and just how out of character it was in a lot of different ways.
Well, and to the point that you made at the very, very beginning, Megan, whether they practice tomorrow or not, you're gonna get up, you're gonna have an early practice. My guess is they probably won't. Practice facilities for the Rangers and Islanders are a bit out of the way. So either you're gonna practice in the morning and then have the afternoon, or you're just gonna have the day off. In New York, they lit the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center. It's shopping week, I've been told. These guys are going to be able to look. Someone put in the chat earlier. It's December 4th. This is the first time the Avs have lost a game by more than 1 goal. I think tomorrow's going to be a day where it's like, hey, go have fun in the city, go shopping, go eat some good food, go out with your friends, stuff like that. And then you've got a matinee game on Saturday. Again, you're going to be, New York, you're going to be on the East Coast. I think, you don't have to worry about morning skate, things like that. Like, I think tomorrow can be a day where these guys, I'm sure they're going to, talk, go over some film, and then they're going to let them go. And I think it's going to be a good day for this group to rest, recharge, and get ready for a road trip. You still got 3 games left up. This was just game 1. You've got to find a way to bounce back. And the key, and what championship teams don't do, because this happens, the teams that have set the records for the all-time best regular seasons ever, they still lose several games, a dozen, close to 20 games in a season. You're going to lose games. To your point, Megan, you can't string these types of performances together. That's what championship teams don't do, is you don't have 2 of these games in a row. Going to be really interesting to see how they respond. As we start to wind down here, I want to get your thoughts on Mackenzie Blackwood. Obviously not his best game. I have a theory on the 4th goal that went off his glove. For you, Mackenzie Blackwood, we've seen some really good starts. This was definitely one where he struggled. I and I hate even using this word for the setup, but it feels like a classic podcast setup. Is this a reason for concern for you, Megan?
No, and that's why I've been trying to tee up the narrative that I think because a lot of this appears to be a communication issue, it's getting back into the rhythm of Blackwood as a goalie, this team playing in front of him, his tendencies, his habits, and then the comfort level for Blackwood there too. The same goal you're talking about is probably the only one that I'm feeling a little bit funky on for Mackenzie Blackwood. And it's still born from what should have been a clean breakout for the Avs where Nelson turns over the puck. And Nelson is one of my favorite players in protecting the puck, a good defensive stick, and he's also a guy who gets beat in his lane coverage. I think it's like Barzal to Anders Lee cross slot, and he nearly had it. Like, it wasn't even like a bad Brock Nelson game, but keeping that in mind, that's probably the goal that I don't love for Mackenzie Blackwood, and the analytics support that. Like, you look at the expected goals against, and it's close to 5. And so, empty net goal, obviously the 6 there. The high to medium danger chances that he faces is something like 23. He has 4 goals against that fit in that category. And so that goes back to a little bit of how those goals happened. I think breakdowns in net front coverage after quick strike attacks because of sloppy play through the neutral zone, so that the Avs can tighten that up. And I think we're not even talking about Mackenzie Blackwood with any sort of concern.
So here's my theory, and this is based on just 2 angles of the replay in particular. Mackenzie Blackwood is very particular about breaking in his gear. Really likes to feel right, to feel, there's certain areas where he likes it softer, more flexibility, things like that. He's particular on it. If folks remember, last year he wore his San Jose Sharks pads that had the teal on the side for several months, even after being traded. It looked to me, and again, I'm kind of saying this just, it's kind of a fun thing. It looked to me, Megan, like he had a really new glove on. It looked very white, very new, different than how his, the glove that we see him use regularly, normally looks at practice, things like that. I'm wondering if he was using a new glove and it didn't close the way that he quite expected it to, or wasn't broken in the way he wanted it to, because it looked like it just hit his hand and dropped down. Like I said, that I'm mostly kind of just having some fun with. But I'm going to ask him when they get back in town, is that a new glove? Like, were you not able to grab that right? So pending a further investigation, I'm willing to give him a pass on that one if it was a new glove.
Interesting you say it, because there's a different play. I'm watching it now to make sure I'm not mistaken. It's the Horvat goal right before it, where I think that he uses his glove hand to keep the puck in play by batting it down, and Manson struggles to find it. And I thought that was weird of him. And this could be because he knew he didn't have a great grasp on it. So I'm trying to watch it back to see from the front angle if I'm seeing this. Oh my gosh, that's exactly what happened. So I think your theory has legs, Jesse, because look at the Horvat goal and then the Adam Pelech goal that follows. There's some weird stuff going on with Mackenzie Blackwood's glove.
So I'll talk to him about it, but I noticed that because there was 2 angles in particular where I said that doesn't look like the glove that he normally wears, because he has it really loose. Like I'm a big gear guy. I talk to them, about their stuff. And it just caught my eye, and it looked like tool didn't work the way he expected,
Mackenzie Blackwood, we have the same hands probably.
Right.
He's only 6'3". He could probably palm a basketball, but
right. I'm sure it's the same.
Just get it going.
Just get it broken in. But so especially if there's a couple, I don't know, maybe there's something there to it.
Which is why I'm very defensive of Blackwood in this game. I think it was just kind of a weird one. I'm not going to get too worried about him. He's also 6-0-1 before this, so 6-1, that's not too bad.
It's December 4th. This is the first time you've lost a game by more than 1 goal. This is your second regulation loss. I think you're in good shape. Megan, any final thoughts on this one?
Yes. So You know how when you're potty training your dog and if they have an accident, you're not supposed to rub their nose in it. That doesn't do any good for the dog.
Mm-hmm.
I feel the same way about the Avs, like enjoying a day off tomorrow to rest and recuperate. There's no sense rubbing their nose in this mess. They should, review the mistakes, but they are playing incredible hockey outside of this game. That is more important than dwelling on this in such a negative way. And that's not me telling anyone how to feel about it, but maybe think about the Avs as a puppy and it might change your mind.
Yeah, that's a great way to leave it. There you go.
Perfect.
Think of the Avs as a puppy. That should be the title of tonight's postgame. That's going to do it. She's Megan. I'm Jesse. What is today? Thursday? We're back at it tomorrow.
Oh my God.
Back at it tomorrow. We'll talk about something. We'll always find something. Maybe we'll talk about shopping week.
Perfect. Loves.
All right. She's Megan. I'm Jesse. Have a good night, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Bye.